Alright, so now we're diving deeper into local edits, and I'm going to show you my all-time favorite tool to do local edits. That is the local adjustment brush. And if you go up here in your menu, so I've already edited this photo with my global edits, right? My temperature, my tone, my hue, saturation, luminance, all of that stuff. And now I'm going to go in and do local edits. And that's the way that I prefer to work, is do the global edits first and then go back and do the local edits. That's a pretty professional workflow. So over here, your tool on the far right is which looks nothing like a brush, is the adjustment brush. So I'm going to select that. And this is all of the masking stuff. So this is all the stuff that we can change in a section of a photograph. We can have the sky have a different color temperature than the rest of the photograph. We could have the sky have a different exposure, different shadows, different whites, different blacks, different clarity, all of this stuff. That's pretty powerful. So this is just like in Photoshop, you can do what is called making layer masks to do local adjustments. I will say that I don't think that these local adjustments are as refined as Photoshop's way of making local adjustments. In my own workflow, I'll do global changes in Lightroom, but when it comes down to doing local edits, I still export my photo and do them in Photoshop. But I do want you to know how to do these, because it is pretty powerful, and I'd imagine eventually the local edits in Lightroom are going to be as advanced as in Photoshop. So the first thing is we're using a brush, just like we were with the clone stamp and spot healing brush. And so with that, we have the brush panel is open. We can change the size of the brush, make it bigger or make it smaller. You can also do that with the bracket keys. So the right bracket makes it larger, the left bracket makes it smaller. That's under the plus and minus keys on a Mac keyboard. And we can change the feathering. So the feathering is how much diffusion is in between the brush and the edge. And the flow. So that's like the opacity. How much of it is applying. Are you doing 100% or 0% or somewhere in the middle? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decide that I am going to darken the water down here a little bit. So I'm going to make my brush a little smaller. Once again, I'm just doing that with the bracket key. And I'm just going to start painting. Now it gets kind of hard because we see the water changing based on these settings that were already put in here from my last edit. But I want to be able to see it even better, so I'm going to click this button, Show Selected Mask Overlay. So if you know how to do layer masks in Photoshop, no worries if you don't, this is going to look really familiar to you because you end up with this little red mask, and what the red mask is showing me is where I have applied the brush. So this is the red area is what I want to change. Everything that I'm not painting red isn't going to be changed. So that looks pretty good to me. I just painted out the water. Here's the edit button right here. And I'm going to unclick Show Selected Mask Overlay. And if I float over this button, it'll show me that mask. Okay, it looks pretty good to me. So I'm just going to take the exposure, because I thought I wanted to darken the water. So I'm going to darken it down a little bit. I'm going to maybe bring out the highlights and make it really like kind of contrasty. So I'm just kind of experimenting with it right now. Maybe bump up the clarity a little bit. Oof, make it pop. We could even go into sharpness and saturation, all that stuff. So it's pretty powerful what you can do, right? So there's before, there's after. I've really, and I did some global edits as well, but look at just the water. So now I darkened it and made it a little bit more contrasty. If I didn't like that, I could go and select this button right here and hit delete, and it could get rid of that edit. Now I do like it, so I'm going to keep it. So now I want to go and do a new adjustment. I want to darken the sky. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to hit new. So now I'm going to make a new mask. So I have this one down here, but I want to make a new one. I'm going to select Show Selected Mask Overlay, and I'm going to just start painting in the sky. Whoa, that looks pretty crazy. I'm not going to worry too much about being really picky about not bleeding over onto the edge of the cliffs, but I will tell you that is the one thing, the like sloppiness that I see in people's work online with this tool in Lightroom is you can see the borders between where the mask was and where it should have been. So having that bleeding into the landscape could get kind of fussy. But I could also zoom in. Sorry, my computer is like so overloaded right now with programs that it's being a little bit weird. But you could zoom in and paint it in even better. So I'm just going to say that that's pretty good for me. I'll maybe make my brush a little smaller and really get into this detail down here. And notice that it is changing. It looks pretty crazy up there in the clouds right now, but that's because there's some edits already selected. Okay, so let's say that that's how we want it. We're going to unclick Show Selected Mask Overlay. So here's the button for that edit. If I float over it, it'll show me where the mask is. Let's change the temperature of the sky. Whoa, that is looking crazy. Maybe the first thing we want to do is bring the highlights down. So let's bring the highlights down. Whoa, make that sky really dramatic. Maybe bring the whites down. Whoa, maybe not that far. We're going to end up, and I actually see a lot of this. I see a lot of like really dramatic edited photos through Lightroom, and this is how people really get kind of crazy with it. So I'm not going to mess with the shadows and the blacks because there are no shadows and blacks in the sky. It's just highlights and whites up there. So I'm not going to mess with that. Maybe bump up the saturation, or you know what else I could do? Yeah, let's bump up the saturation, and maybe even let's see what dehaze is going to do. Whoa, we don't want to go that way. We want to go the other way. Oh, that looks crazy. I don't want to do that. So I'm just experimenting right now. I don't like what dehaze did, and I actually don't really like what sharpen did that much. I'm going to bring sharpen down a little bit. So that looks pretty good to me. And once I'm there, I'm going to just hit done right here. And now I've darkened the water and increased the saturation and the contrast in it, and I darkened the sky a little bit. So anytime I want to see those pins to see if I like them again, because remember, it's non-destructive editing, we can always go back and select these buttons and get rid of them. Now let's do one more thing. Let's say that I want to really saturate this landscape. I want to bring out all the greens in this landscape. So I'm going to grab a new brush. I'm going to make my brush bigger. I'm going to show selected mask overlay, and I'm going to just start brushing over the landscape. And the mask is taking a second to generate, but that's just because my computer is lagging right now. So I'm not doing a really bang up job of painting in the landscape perfectly. You could go in and get really precise with it. I do like this tool because you don't have to be super precise with it, but sometimes when things do bleed over, like if I were darkening the sky and that was darkening the landscape as well, we'd end up with this like highlighted dark line on the edge of the landscape and it looked pretty weird. So I think this is fine for the landscape, because what I want to do with the landscape is I want to increase the saturation. I want to make it look like, whoa, look at that. Holy cow. It's almost like a painting. So I can float over the top here, and we can see where the mask is. I'm going to clean up the mask a little bit. So I'm going to make my brush a little smaller. And now I'm not going to actually put on the Show Select Mask Overlay. I'm just going to paint, and I'm going to see it change as I paint the area. So I would say that this edit is pretty punchy. It's pretty strange. It's not maybe something I really would do. I think for the sake of this demo, it's good, but I don't think I'd really make this landscape that purpley. So maybe I would take the saturation down a little bit. All right, so we just used the brush, the adjustment brush, to make 3 adjustments to this one photo. The sky, we increased the saturation of the landscape, and we darkened the water. Let us say, you know what, let's just say that we don't like this landscape one. I think it's a little bit too much. And let's just say that we go, we go and we edit our photos, say we're done, we go and we edit another photo, we click over here, and then we come back and say, you know what, I actually want to see that edit again. So I open it up and say, you know what, it looks a little hokey to me in the landscape. I actually want to get rid of that edit. You're just going to select the adjustment brush, and your pins will pop up. And, sorry, my photo hasn't even loaded yet. And I'm just going to select the pin that's the landscape. Oh no, the Wheel of Death. Alright, select that pin and hit delete. And my landscape will go back to how it was before, and I could remake that adjustment if I wanted to. So I'm going to actually do that. I'm going to show mask overlay so I can see where I'm painting. And I'm going to actually do that adjustment again, but I'm going to do it a little bit more subtle this time. Let's let it load here. If you ever accidentally paint outside of the border of something like the landscape, I'll show you how you can fix that. So let's pretend that I just painted and extended into the sky. Well, I don't want to do that. So if I hold down, what is it? Nope. Here, give me a second. I'll figure out what the button is. Oh, that's it. Option. If you hold down Option, you notice that the paintbrush goes from positive to minus. So I'm going to hold down Option, and it's going to go to minus, and that's going to take away the part of the mask. So now I'm brushing away the mask. So that's in case you go over the border of what you were trying to paint in. And as soon as you let go of Option, it will go back to the plus sign. I'm going to try to really clean this thing up. Let me grab my brush, and we're going to do a really hard edge here to clean up this sky. All right, we're getting there. A little bit more help. Okay, so I got rid of it in the sky, and now I'm going to just clean up the edges of this brush. Let's go feather all the way down here. And finish painting in the landscape. We're going to call that good enough for government work. It's getting pretty weird down here. Let me finish that in. Alright, and once we're there, I'm going to unclick Show Selected Mask Overlay, and I am just going to increase the saturation. Oops. Increase the saturation a little bit. Maybe darken the landscape up a little bit too. Maybe take some of the exposure off of the landscape. Maybe not that much. Maybe something like that. That looks pretty good to me. So let's look at this photo before and after. So let me hit done so we're done with the adjustment brush. That's where the photo started, and that's with a little bit of editing. That's a pretty big change. Okay, so that is the local adjustment brush. Super powerful tool, my favorite way of doing those local edits.